Hello, friends. Welcome to the official YouTube channel of VS Strategic Business Consulting. Continuing with our series conversation with the thought leader. Today, our guest is an eminent speaker, founder of a law firm, co founder of a community agency, and has won numerous awards for her excellent work in different fields, specifically in the field of, upliftment of mankind and community. Some of the awards are she is the recipient of Martin Luther King Leadership Award, Giraffe Award by Women's Chamber of Commerce, has been identified as a top influencer businesswoman from Palm Beach County, and has been a leadership coach specifically concentrating on the purpose centered leadership aspect, has worked on faith based coaching and advising many entrepreneurs and communities, and have advised many organizations, few including the Fortune 500. Let's welcome the co founder of Sharon Gill International, Sharon Gill herself.
Thank you
Welcome,
so
Sharon.
much. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm honored to be part of your show, and I look forward to our conversation today.
Excellent, and thanks a lot. I would like to first start by thanking you for accepting my request to be on this series in conversation with thought leader. And actually given you the background about this particular initiative, why we as strategic consulting we have started off with this. Having said that, to start with the conversation, I would like to, request you to introduce yourself because you have done so many things. Been a chief operating officer of a law firm, a co-founder of a purpose-centered leadership, been into ministries, working consistently on the community upliftment, and I'm really not sure of how do I actually, you know, introduce you. So I fall short of my words. So I request you to introduce you before we commence our actual interaction.
Well, you did a pretty good job, and I'll try to be as brief because I think I'm dating myself. I've done a lot of stuff, but just a real quick backstory. I migrated to the US in '86. So I was in my very early 20s then, and I came from Jamaica and started out here really as a nanny, believe it or not, and worked for a couple of years in New York until I was able to get the US experience. I started working with American Express shortly after that. Worked with them for about 8 years, learned a lot of the corporate language here. But during that time, of course, I met my husband, and we worked together while he was going through law school. I was, supporting him, so to speak, in a lot of ways. But then right after law school, he took a job, and within 3 years, we realized that we wanted to be entrepreneurs. We wanted to go on our own. We realized that we wanted to call our own shots. So we joined together and we co-founded the Gill Law Firm. And we ran that together for several years until we actually merged that firm into one of the largest firms in the country. Then at that point, I took my opportunity to spin off and start a charity that would uplift mankind. It was a holistic vision where it would deal with the aspects of food security, but also career development, getting them back on their feet, mindset change, helping them to become productive citizens in our country once more. And that was a real education of itself, just, seeing how people rise to that level of expectation you set for them. That was the basis really between the law firm work and the charity work was the basis for my purpose-centered leadership, which we're going to talk about some more. In between all of that, I spun off and also did a ministry with my husband. We actually had a church for several years. So I don't know, we're entrepreneurial at nature, but I think, we're going to talk a little bit about purpose and vision, but I just feel like I was just called to really help uplift people at all levels of life, really. Whether they're poor in the poor neighborhoods or whether they're in the CEO suite, doesn't matter. That I just believe that's what I was, wired to do. And, we're from what we call a third world country, right? But those third world countries are like, to me, they're like birthing wombs,
Mhm.
right? For people who we're not afraid because we've been at the bottom. So we're not afraid at all. We have no fear. We're fearless because for us, the only way is up, correct? And so it gave us a sense of fearlessness. And I think a lot of my resolve and courage just came from that upbringing. And it really has helped to shape who I am, and who I, still aspire to become as well.
Fantastic. Pretty inspiring though, because it's certainly would have been a roller coaster ride. Because obviously, starting from being a nanny to here. Now, let me start with this question. The first question, right? You've been a nanny, you've been with American Express Bank, you've been a co-founder or the operating officer of law firm, Wayne, along with Wayne, right? Along with Wayne.
Yes, yes,
Then
yes.
Then you co-founded OSS, a community agency, then a purpose-centered leadership, and then a ministry. What is your purpose? What is the purpose of Sharon Gill International? Because you're into so many things, not just as an individual, but if I talk about four entities by itself, right? Right? What
Yes.
is that one purpose of Sharon Gill International?
When you asked that question just now, and I thought of it, right? Purpose, right? And vision and calling, right? They're kind of like all the same in a way. And as I expressed a little earlier, I believe that my purpose here, I wrote my vision statement and my mission statement about 20 years ago after reading this book by Mr. Covey, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. And he talked about writing your mission statement, and I wrote out then that my mission/vision is to have a positive spiritual impact on everyone in my sphere of influence, positive spiritual and professional impact on everyone in my sphere of influence. And back then, there was no Facebook, there was no social media. So back then, it was just one-on-one. If I was interacting with you, if you were in my sphere at all, you're going to leave knowing that I've had an impact on you somehow, professionally or spiritually. And that's how I would orient my day, orient my week, orient my life. Like, who can I impact? And when social media happened, that
Mhm.
influence and that impact began to, happen through my posts, my content, right? My interactions. And that positive spiritual or professional impact is really, I believe that I was put here to uplift, empower individuals. And what Sharon Gill International hopes to do is to take that and empower teams and organizations. So I envision a world where people are empowered, right? They're living they're totally self-actualized. They're living in their full purpose. They're fully empowered, and organizations and teams and leaders are purpose-centered, purpose-led, purpose-driven. That's my long-term goal, what I call my second act, that, when my eyes are closed, that's what I want my legacy to be.
Fantastic. Okay. Now, you have actually, forced me to ask this question. When you speak about spirituality and leadership and community and other things, I remember I need to quote this. You said, we believe that leaders and organizations need to think beyond profitability, and they will have to embrace purpose of adopting community upliftment as one of the things. Now, I have a doubt for the benefit of people who are watching this and probably will be watching after this goes live on, after this is uploaded on the YouTube. Thing is, business, even in the financial and accounting terms, you're coming from a law background, so I will probably take the lenience of using this, right? If we typically look into the definition of an organization, a company, it says as a going concern for profitability, right? So now you say now organizations and leaders need to look beyond profitability. So my understanding is they have to probably consider even beyond valuation, beyond share values, beyond market capitalization and those things, because everything ultimately boils down to your profitability and the way you run your business. But you say
Yes.
purpose of upliftment of community and needs to be adopted, and that would create a culture where the team and the customers and the community would embrace the organization and grow. Could you
Yes.
please elaborate that? Because you specifically use the word faith based in that
Yes.
particular statement. So, how are
Yes.
you actually interlinking faith and business?
Okay. Well, you express it so well. Where I believe that when, yes, we're in business for a profit. We understand the financials, right? We have to pay the bills, we have to pay employees, and that's beautiful. But the landscape is changing so much, V. We're being forced as leaders now to look beyond that we need that. But the millennials who are coming into the workflow force, this generation Z, that's not enough. And it's not enough even for me, who's a baby boomer, right?
Mm-hmm,
And I'll tell you where this began to resonate with me. When I was running my charity, I ran it for 16 years. There were
mm-hmm,
two kinds of donors. There
mm-hmm,
were donors who would write a check and say, hey, I'm supporting you. And that was wonderful. And there were donors who would write a check and say, physically, we're coming over and we're going to send volunteers and we're going to have you as part of our corporate social responsibility. We're going to give you strategic planning. We're going to be your actual partner. And we would have a literal relationship like this, my nonprofit and their companies. And I would go back to their company, fairly often and give reports, in boardrooms. And I would see the difference with how their their teams, their employees would relate to even their leadership. They were proud. They were proud to be part of something or a company that was so invested in the community. And as for me on the nonprofit side, it felt like, wow, it did first of all, it did a lot for us just financially, but it also opened doors for us with other corporations. And it made us feel supported in a way beyond money. And I felt like this should be the model for every company, right? Every company should have this model where beyond their profit, they're using parts of their profit to invest in the same community that they live and work, right? There are people out there who needs empowerment, and that can be accomplished through working through a NGO, right? And a nonprofit agency. The way how I tie my faith in. So I'm from the Christian faith, right? And so a lot of my values come from that. I value God is my number one value, faith, family, etc. But I believe that when you as a leader show up in your organization, you're showing up as your whole self. So your values come with you. So how you make decisions, how you operate your organization, how you interact with your team, that's going to be based on your values.
mm-hmm.
So I integrate my faith values with my leadership. So integrity is huge. Empathy is huge. Compassion is huge. That's why my company was called Oasis Compassion Agency. Those are huge. And so even as a leader, those values are going to be the foundation. That's going to be what's undergirding my organization. And so I integrate them both. I'm not there talking about Jesus per se. I don't have to. I'm being that model. I don't have to talk about it, right? The saying goes like, preach the Bible without using words. So I'm being it. And that's what I mean about faith-based coaching. It just means that me coaching you, I'm relying on something beyond my own self. That's what that pretty much means.
I don't know how to express it. It was so beautifully explained. In fact, with your permission, I would like to quote this. It's pretty similar to what we talk about a statement in the Eastern philosophy called as a Humbromas. And my mentor, he keeps telling this. And he says, if as an individual, if we are able to follow four specific foundations, which comes from our background, our family ethics and values, and those four are being sensitive, simplicity, surplus mentality, which you spoke about, community, improvements and enhancement, and the third one is sharing, caring, and sacrificing. He uses this sharing, caring, and sacrificing. Fourth is self-awareness. So you beautifully explained that in your purpose centered. Fantastic. Thanks a lot. So,
Yes.
continuing further, I would like to ask you in another statement you said, we are living in a time of global uncertainty. I understand we are in COVID 19, but I think when you made the statement, we didn't know about COVID. So you specifically said we are living in the world of global uncertainty. The rules have changed. You used the rules have changed more than ever. One needs to look and work towards the purpose and have a clarity in their business, life, and faith. May I request you to elaborate on that? What made you, you know, make that statement? There should be something which you would have experienced or which you would have seen, right? So can you
Yeah.
please elaborate that, please?
Well, you're right. It was, I think it was perhaps before COVID, but I began to feel a shift anyway, in the way how we're doing things. For example, before COVID, I was living in Florida for 27 years
Mm-hmm.
with the brick and mortar businesses, with my nonprofit. And my husband and I decided last year to sell our buildings, to close our brick and mortar, and to adopt
Mm-hmm.
a remote lifestyle, to adopt a laptop lifestyle, so to speak, to get out of brick and mortar, because we saw that was going to change. This is before COVID. So we literally sold our house, closed our companies, properly, and packed up and moved out of state to a
Mm-hmm.
state that we had no one, we knew no one, because we felt like, let's do something different. Let's get ahead of the curve. People ask me, how did you guys make this decision before COVID? Well, we literally moved everything that we did to online and started to change the rules of how we did business for 20 something years. When COVID hit, I was already online. I didn't feel the issues. I was already online. So I think leaders, we have to be looking 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ahead. And I said the rules have changed, and the rules were changing. How we as leaders respond and react, it's different. And I talked about clarity in business. And what did I mean by that is, as an organization, whether you are a one-person show, solo entrepreneur, or a huge corporation, who do you serve? Are you clear about who do you serve, what you offer, what pain points you're fixing or solving? Being very clear about that is going to make you much more effective. And a lot of companies don't do that. They want to be all things to all people. I know I struggled in the beginning trying to pinpoint, when we did a law firm 20 something years ago. We're trying to be a general practitioner, and an insurance guy said, no, pick one thing. We're like, no, we're just starting out. We got to catch everyone. Let's pick one thing. You're going to be so much more successful. Best advice he ever gave us, right? And we did. And it was true. We narrowed to one field. And business needs to know who you serve. Whether you're a solo guy or you are a huge corporation, you need to have that self-awareness. And in life, what do you believe? What do you stand for? Right? It goes back to those values again. So if I know what I stand for, like in my case, I said, it's faith, family, empowerment. When I get certain offers, I'm going to see, does this line up with my values, with who I believe I am? If it doesn't, then it's a no. It's easy to make a decision because I know who I stand for. I know what I believe, what my values are.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing with organizations. They should have the same mindset. Is this kind of business for me or not for me? Is this who I'm here to serve or not serve? So I think we are so much more effective when we have a pointed spear, when we're focused. And that's probably why I made that statement. And the rules are changing. And the more you know who you are, even when the rules change, even if you change industry, you're still the same person when you know who you are. You know how you asked me how I did ministry and law firm and the nonprofit and SGI. Well, I'm the same person in every one of those organizations, empowering others, adding value to others. In everything I'm doing, same value system goes along with me.
In fact, I would like to mention this. While I was actually doing some amount of research and I was going through your podcast and reading through your blogs, I was actually awestruck because how could an individual work in law? And specifically, that too, I think you were concentrating a bit more on the corporate law side. And I can understand. I have few friends, so I know how, demanding it is. How could you manage law, work towards the community, maintain your ministry, and also work on the purpose-centered leadership framework or aspect? It was slightly a kind of sort of, I thought, okay, probably Sharon Gill is to be considered by Marvels for the next Superwoman series. Absolutely, right? Because it's so difficult. I've seen people who are multi-talented and multifaceted, but you're multifunctional with a multi-directional aspect of it. But now I understand it's not multi-directional, but you're trying to cover the 360 aspect, getting into,
That's
focusing into
right.
one aspect. Now,
That's right.
let me ask you this. How were you able to do that? Now, it's so difficult because I'm sure you would have gone through in LinkedIn the several posts, you know, work from home and work from office, maintaining work life balance. You being a mother of two kids and also one, you have a pet,
Granddaughter.
right? Yeah, yeah. So how did you find time and manage all these things? Co-founder of
Partnership.
four, operations, chief operations officer of one, and a ministry, operating ministry, and an advisor for many, many organizations. How did you find time?
You know what? I think my superpower, well, other than God Himself, God gave me this husband. He's
Okay.
been my husband and partner for 33 years. And, I talk a lot about the importance of having that partnership, in life and in business. And we've been fortunate to be partners in life and business. And we respect each other's talents. Okay. We respect each other's gifts. And, my husband has allowed me to really, walk in my gifts and support it and I him as well. And so every step of the way, I've always had this partner
Hmm.
supporting me, just helping me, which has allowed me to really accomplish so much. I couldn't do it alone. I could never do it alone. It would have been virtually impossible. But just having that support, whether it's mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, made all the difference. And what came, you're right, there were three things happening at one point. There was a law firm, there was a charity, and there was church, the ministry. And it was my experiences, working with those three. And like I said, I was the same person, the same value system in all three. That's what birthed the idea of purpose-centered leadership. Because you know what? I had to lead this organization and I had to lead it from a place of purpose. It was always a higher purpose. The ultimate higher purpose was God. And then it was always a higher purpose of, look, let's take some of this profits from the law firm, which is how I launched the agency. It was law firm profits, so using that money to start over here. So I believe in that model. And then I got my team involved, my staff, they got involved. We did stuff for Christmas. I got involved with the people who are disempowered in the community, and they just loved it. They loved being a part of that. And that's where the idea was birthed. I would say 4 years ago that, you know what, when I'm done with the law firm and the charity, I'm going to establish this purpose-centered leadership. And my ultimate dream is to have an institute,
Hmm.
where I actually have nonprofits and corporations in this institute where I'm helping nonprofits gain the leadership skills that they need to be run efficiently and helping organizations choose who they should align with, and giving them the training too to be more purpose centered. Let me tell you something. A lot of people say, a lot of companies say we do corporate social responsibility, but it's not really felt in the DNA of the company. It's a checkbox, right? Because it's a good thing to do, but it's not part of their decision making process. That has to be in the CEO's DNA. It's totally different mindset and paradigm. When it's in his DNA or her DNA, it will be communicated in everything that they do. It will be part of their P&L statement. It will be part of their staff meetings. It will be part of their strategic planning meetings. When it's truly in the company's DNA, not just the right thing to do, but what we do. Not the right thing to do, but what we do and who we are. And that's my vision for SGI, to get that in more and more CEOs' DNA, so to speak.
Uh, Brilliant way. In fact, this reminds me of a couple of organizations, specifically Tata Sons. Tata Sons, I'm sure you would be knowing, it's a conglomerate which works across the group, headquartered in India. It's over 150 years now. There are many companies under its umbrella. Tata Sons is a group company. There are many companies under its umbrella, but there's one purpose. The founder, he said, unless any organization they work towards the economical upliftment of the people that they are serving, they are just entrepreneurs and they are not, they are just business people and they are not entrepreneurs. He mentioned this quote, and this reminds me, what you explained reminds me of that. In fact, the reason why I said that is, in India we have a law, specifically for organizations, that they will have to set aside a set percentage. I think it's around 3 or 5% towards the corporate social responsibility. Is it a good thing?
I
Yes and
love
no.
that.
For
I
me,
think it is.
yeah, for me, the way I see it is yes and no. The thing is, it becomes more like a tick box approach, right?
Right.
Now
Right.
that probably, it gets so much into the, as you rightly mentioned, the DNA, the cultural aspect of the organization, that it just becomes a to-do list rather than a must, as a responsible citizen. You know, you know.
But here's why I like it. Here's
Mm-hmm.
why I like it. I like that. Here's why it starts there. Because here we don't have that. Here
Uh-huh.
in the US, we don't have that. I would love to see, even as a first step, that
Okay.
that 3% of our corporate earnings will go towards the community. I can tell you, as a nonprofit founder for 16 years and running one, and the struggle to find grants and funding, if that mechanism was in place in the United States, nonprofits would never struggle. They would never struggle, because they would always be, and if it was even localized to say, for example, if you're operating in this community and there's 10 nonprofits, make sure, there should be that middleman to say, make sure that they're being funded, like, even regionally, even locally. So I like it as a first step, because it will at least be a first step.
Uh-huh. That
Right now,
I
there's
agree.
no steps. There's no steps right now in many
Yeah.
companies. There's zero
Uh,
steps.
uh,
There's one other company that I like, Unilever. Um,
Unilever. Yeah.
yeah, I would like you to send me a link for that company you mentioned, because I'd
Sure.
like to do some more work on them, some more studies. Unilever I like because, excuse me, when I was studying who is doing this purpose-centered leadership thing right, I couldn't find many companies, but I did find Unilever. And I mentioned to you, I was from a third world country, Jamaica, right? So I like their story about Lifebuoy, which is a soap that third world company typically have, right? It's sold there. And Unilever, when they make the Lifebuoy soap, which is an antimicrobial, whatever, bacteria, parts of the profits from Lifebuoy goes toward training and education of how to live, hygiene, take care of hygiene in poor countries. So they directly link that profit from that antimicrobial, microbial soap to hygiene.
Hmm.
That's strategic, that's thought out, that's purposeful, that's intentional. And that's that's a model that I truly admire. And they practice this with a lot of their products. So that's the model for me. I think I would like to see more companies move toward.
Fantastic. Because for me, that's more of an evolutionary thought process and bringing out, like probably, now that you said you're from third world, basically. So I'm sure you should be knowing Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso, the country Burkina Faso. Thomas Sankara is the 21st president. He was the first president of Burkina Faso, but prior to that, it was called as colony of French. So
Okay.
yeah, I think I'll send that link. Probably you would be interested. He worked something
Yeah.
in lines with what you said, being the first president. Brilliant.
Yes.
Now, let me understand this. To do all these things, I'm sure there have to be a lot of, awareness and self-awareness, and I'm sure you are. Otherwise, it would be extremely challenging. Even though you had the support from Wayne, but it would have been an extremely difficult situation to manage all these things. Who was your inspiration in your personal and in your professional life? What qualities inspired you, and how did you groom yourself to be where you are today? This question I invariably ask almost everyone in this series in conversation with thought leaders, because uh, we want to get inspired. We might have inspiration, we might have inspired, be inspired with certain qualities, but how do we groom ourselves to be where we have to reach is something we want to identify and learn that aspect. Could I request you to elaborate on that, please?
So on the personal level, I have to say it's my grandmother and my mom.
Mhm.
My mom had a fourth grade education, but she was the wisest woman I've ever met. My grandmother, I don't know even how far she went, but just the wisdom
Mhm.
and their faith, their courage. My mom grew up in the country and had to walk miles and miles to school. They told me they carried water on their head. and But she was a woman who was a great encourager of other people. She could see the potential in every single person. And I grew up seeing people at my home who would come to see my mom, and they just came for prayers or they came for encouragement. And she was always breaking bread and breaking off some of my food so that they could have something to eat. And I knew no other way to be. I knew no other way to be but to share, to
Mhm.
encourage, to see beyond, to see a future for people. And I didn't even realize it until after I started my charity. I didn't, people ask me, why did you start? And I had different reasons, but it was until when I sat and I thought about, wait a second, this is where it started. So that was my background. That was my everyday conscious life.
Mhm.
So I came to this country. I was 21 or 22 years old. I met my husband 6 months later. He was 21, and he was still in college. But I didn't understand the American norms and culture.
Mhm.
I just didn't understand how they spelled some of the words there. I was on the British system. And so he single-handedly, as a young man, 1 year younger than myself, taught me the American norms and culture. When I had my first job with American Express, he taught me how to prepare for a performance appraisal. He taught me, just how to navigate this corporate speak. So I have to say on the professional side, I could choose, people I've read their books or attended their seminars. There's Tony Robbins, but if I had to be honest, I have to say it was Wayne, even though he was a year younger, who shaped me and shaped my thinking. And then also encouraged me to like go for it. You're smarter than many people I know. He would say to me, hey, you're smarter than many people I know. You're just smart. Go for it. And so professionally, he was my first person grooming me on the corporate side. Like, this is how
Mhm.
they speak. This is how they act. This is what they do. And so I took that and I took my mom and grandmother's resolve and courage and I packaged it, I packaged it and I empowered my own self and I encouraged my own self. My mom was always in my ear because she actually migrated here too. Later on, I was living with my husband and myself for 20 something years.
Okay.
constantly reminding me of who I am and who I can become. And she was constantly, during that time, she passed away 2 years ago, encouraging my husband, encouraging myself, and encouraging everyone, including the people at my charity. She would call the clients at my charity, those poor people. She would actually come to the charity and sit in the lobby and just pray with the downtrodden,
Mm-hmm.
encourage men and women. So that is the richest thing in my background I could actually share. And that's whose legacy I'm still trying to live and live up to.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Fantastic. In terms of the term leadership, right? There are too many frameworks, too many, I would say models and approaches which have been there. Having said that, in the current scenario, in the last 6 months, almost, if not every leadership model or everything, almost they failed to foresee or advise to be ready for such a circumstance or a situation, right? What is the change that you notice in the mere definition of leadership or mere term leadership? What is the gap? There is some kind of a leadership which is required, like you have mentioned the purpose centered, and what is the current leadership and what's the gap? The organization, how do they consider an approach in bridging this particular gap? Because I think that's extremely important, not just for the future, but to survive the current scenario.
Yeah, there is definitely a gap. And we understand, again, especially from a third world perspective, top-down leadership, doesn't exist. It just doesn't work anymore, right? Even if anyone's practicing top-down leadership, authoritarian, we know that's not working. And we've seen a huge shift, especially here in the United States. People have moved away from that. It doesn't work. And especially with the millennials and the Gen Zs, it's just definitely not effective. So we hear another popular model is servant leadership, where leaders are more empathetic. Leaders are serving their team, and it's a great model. A lot of people here love it. I love it too. A lot of churches try to practice it. And purpose-centered leadership loves that model, but we just go one step beyond with regards to the community. What I'm seeing for this, especially 2020, agile and adaptable leaders is what was needed. Situational leaders,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it was those leaders who could adapt. And I saw the failures with that. A lot of companies, they were not embracing online enough. They
Mm-hmm.
were still brick and mortar in their thinking and in their physical space. They were not up on technology. And I hope that this year, if for nothing, it taught leaders, you have to be, 4 steps ahead in technology at this point. So a lot of companies closed prematurely in this pandemic because they couldn't make that shift. The shift to Zoom, the shift to online. And it's not just to Zoom. It was a shift to the mindset shift. It
Exactly.
was a mindset shift. That's what was lacking. And it also shows me, because I've been working with some companies, via Zoom. I'm actually like what they call a remote COO for for a couple of these companies right now. What I notice is the mindset shift. The companies that I'm successfully working with, those leaders, they were always technology.
Mm-hmm.
They were always on top of technology. So they could make the shift, but it's not just technology. Your people needed to really respect you and respect your leadership and trust your leadership,
Mm-hmm.
because so there's a lot of communication. Communication skill is a big gap I see too. How are we communicating? How are you communicating, first of all, when you had everyone there? Was it regular? Was it frequent? Was it inspirational and aspirational? Or was it just complaining, complaining, complaining? So when communication had to shift to, when we had to shift to online communication, if you didn't have a relationship with your team before in communication, you weren't going to have it now, because now they're all over the place. If there was no trust before, you're not going to have it now, because now they're at home. So what I see as the gaps that leaders have to really work on, especially this downtime, is communicating more effectively,
Mm-hmm.
communicating humanely, So it's not so much employer employee nowadays, it's human to human.
Exactly.
So I'm checking in with my employees. It's not, hey, employee, have you punched in? Employee, have you done your timesheet? No, it's, hey, Sharon, how are you doing? How's your family doing? How are you feeling? How's your anxiety level? It's now human to human. That's where we have to go to. And then trust. You have to develop that trust with your team that they feel like they can buy into you. They will work when the kids go to bed. Trust.
Hmm.
And that gap has to be, has to be filled. That communication gap, communicating trust, communicating humanely, communicating empathy, and the leader has to be agile and adaptable and bring the whole team up on technology. I've learned so much technology this year, and I thought
Hmm.
I was good, but I've had to learn so much more. I had to adapt real quickly because my clients were adapting. So I had to adapt real quickly, but it was for the better. Because when I adapted, I also allowed other clients who weren't on technology to come on technology so we could navigate this new landscape because we're not going to go back to the way things were. And I really hope leaders realize that. And even when the pandemic has a vaccine and whatever, we're always going to be thinking, what is the next COVID that we don't have a vaccine for? The world is flat. Everyone's traveling. So the next issue may come out of Jamaica. Who knows? I mean, it may come out of a different country. So we're going to have to always be ready to shift and pivot. Be very agile. Be very flexible. So that's where leaders need to fix that gap: adaptability, communications, humanity, and then the purpose part, like, okay, and we stand for something much bigger than ourselves so that your team really buys into you. And you are helping those people who are left disenfranchised to come up in the world as well. The community wins, everyone wins with that approach.
Brilliant, brilliant. In fact, there was a recent article around 2 3 months. I think it's around 3 months back. I'd actually, written on LinkedIn where I specifically mentioned about a model called as Core Smart, where these are the points where I tried to hit. So uh, I'm on cloud nine because I got the validation from the top influencers, women influencers. Fantastic, fantastic. Now, in this session, you spoke twice about Gen Z and millennials. Right now, we know that future is in their hands. Now they are going to be assuming the important leadership roles, important, I would say, visible roles, and they are going to contribute and take this to the next level wherever they are in, be it the business or the administration or the economy or the purpose itself. They are going to be in that position and take them to the next level. Now, what suggestion or advice would you give to them? Their thought process is always at least 5 years ahead of what we think. They speak about social media, they speak about, you know, uh, friendship online, and they speak about collaboration online, which are those terms today we are talking about in the business, right? But these people, they've been doing it from the day they are born. So they are smart, but yet there's certain aspects that they need to understand with respect to humanity and individual collaboration and relationship. So now there is a kind of, uh, I would say, a good sync, yet as a catalyst, there is something which is required. Now, as a leadership coach, my request to you is, now that you have helped so many organizations, some in Fortune 500, what is that advice? What is a piece of suggestion that you would want to give to these individuals who would be assuming the future leadership positions?
You're right. They're ahead of us. They're ahead of me. They're ahead of you in technology. We just can't compete on that level with these folks, right? But what they're not ahead of us right now is certain fundamental traditional values that you still need, ingrained values like, integrity. And I'm not saying they're not integrity people, right? But values like, integrity and fairness. I think it's important that these younger people do look up to older models of, older mentors, as for those of us, because I've spoken to millennial leaders. They're brilliant. They've taught me so much, but I've also taught them a lot. I've taught them things like even balance, work-life balance. I've been able to counsel them on and mentor them on integrity, fairness. You know, and again, not saying that they're not in integrity, but it's not their first thing. Their first thing, what they're huge on is community involvement. They're big on that. That's a driver for them. They want to help. They want to save the whales. They really do. But there are certain things that they haven't fully developed, and it's just based on just when they came up, what were the priorities in their time. And so I would suggest to younger leaders, find an older leader that you admire and be mentored by them and do what I call a circular mentorship. Because older leaders are constantly learning. I'm constantly learning, but I learn from young people. So, and they can teach you and you can teach them. And so they win on the technology piece, they win on the forward thinking, but I do see just things like the work-life balance. I see sometimes their thought process about hustling and grinding is misplaced. I hear a lot about, hustling and grinding and I just think some of that is kind of misplaced. So I just think mentorship, leadership development, more traditional leadership development for this group would be good. And I think really for all leaders, they should be constantly in a leadership development mode. I am constantly reading and challenging myself and testing myself and seeing where I'm lacking, and just trying to develop myself. I just became part of this John Maxwell team, been a huge investment. Why? Because I want to be in a constant company of mentors who are ahead of me. So I think that's got to be a culture for every leader, young, millennial, or or older ones like myself, constantly learning best practices of leadership and challenging yourself and testing yourself and up-leveling, where you need to do so.
Fantastic. I would like to just add one point to it. I think they also need to learn to be emotionally resilient,
Yeah.
because I think the point of concentration or the focus is timing is too a shorter period, right?
Yeah.
Now I see my kids. I have two kids, so I have a teenage son and a daughter, so I know, how they start saying things and how they immediately get distracted. I think they need to really learn the art of being emotionally resilient and try to gain out of it and learn. I think it's one aspect they really need to learn from elders and bring about the best practices along with agility. They are agile, obviously, but they need to really learn to mature in that aspect. Brilliant, brilliant, fantastic. And uh, we're close to the time. We just have 5 minutes. So prior to that, Sharon, I would like to, on behalf of the participants and also from a special request from my end, I would like you to actually give your experience about this whole session and also some closing comments from your end. Now, before we wind up the session.
Okay. Well, I call this a conversation on leadership, so my opinion of it was a wonderful experience for me, and I hope for your audience too, because it allowed us to talk as leaders to leaders, to exchange. You challenged me, you pushed me, and you made me think more, about what my answers are and even why I thought what I thought. When it came to my mom and my grandmother, right? Like, wow, those people really impacted me. So I love these kinds of conversations. And I would leave the audience with this. I'm sure that your audience are primarily leaders themselves. is that, ask yourself a few questions. When was the last time you engaged in leadership development for yourself? It could be as simple as reading a leadership book. It's a little bit challenging. And then putting into practice at least one thing that you've learned. We love
Mhm.
reading books, we love listening to books, but when have we actually stopped and put into practice what we've learned? I also ask your leaders, is there someone they're mentoring? And is someone mentoring them? Because I always believe that as leaders, we should be bringing someone up for pay or no pay. And we should also be in a situation where we have a few people ahead of us that can bring us up. So I would also ask your audience if they're practicing that art. And I would also say to the audience, where do you find yourself as a leader? Do you feel like you are, purpose led? Do you feel that you've embraced like the best elements of leadership, adaptability, agility, compassion and empathy? How are you communicating with your team right now? Did this conversation challenge you to look at them not from the employee, but from human to human? When was the last time you actually did a check-in to your teams on a human level? I was just challenge the audience to think about that, and if you're doing well, I applaud you. But I know in my case, every time I check in with myself, there's something I need to improve, and I go about improving that.
Yeah, yeah. There's nothing which is perfect on this earth, so there's
No,
always scale, a scope to improve and enhance. So I think that's inevitable, and that's the sweetness of being a human. There's always an opportunity
absolutely.
to improve.
Yes.
Brilliant,
Yes.
brilliant, fantastic. And Sharon, I would like to thank you for your time, and it was certainly an amazing, discussion and fantastic points and some of the thought-provoking examples and points that you have shared. I'm sure it's going to be of uh, immense help and as a guide for a lot of people who are looking to grow in that aspect. Thank you. Thanks a lot for your time, and let's be connected. And I would, circle back with you to request you for your time and Wayne's time again in
Okay,
time,
will do.
probably in a month or two. Take your time,
Okay,
and then we would do that.
I'll let him know.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Sharon. Thanks a lot for
You're
your time.
welcome. Take care. Have a blessed day. Take care.
Great. Bye bye.
Bye.
And friends, thanks a lot for attending the session. And if for some reason, if you're unable to attend the live session, this is going to be uploaded. The edited version will be uploaded on the YouTube channel, and you can go through it in the playlist in conversation with the thought leader. And Sharon, I would be, sharing the edited version with you, so that if you want to use it at
Absolutely.
points, right? And so, thanks a lot, my friends. And let me remind you, this uh, YouTube channel, we would be concentrating majorly on building purposeful leadership, organization development, leadership management, and succession management. So please, if you have not subscribed, please do subscribe to VS Strategic Business Consulting. Like, share, and comment. If you have any questions, you could share it with us in the comment, or you could email it to me at venkateshans@venkateshans.com, or contact vs@venkateshans.com. I would certainly connect back with our guests, get the answers, and share it with you. Having said that, if you're from India, have a very good evening. Enjoy your supper. If you're in the US and parts, have a blessed day ahead. See you again in the next session. Thank you all. Thanks, Atar. Thanks, Sharon.